All right, today we are going to do a review of measurement. So first, let's review length. So when we think about length, you want to think about measuring something sideways or going from left to right. And our vocabulary you want to review are the words long and short. And then if we're comparing two things, we could say one is longer and one is shorter. And then when we're thinking about which is the most long, we say it's the longest, and then the opposite would be the shortest. So for example, we have these two carrots. And remember when we measure that it's so important to start them at the same starting point so we can tell how long they are. So you don't want to start here in the middle. You want to start at the same baseline. So we can tell that the carrot on top is longer and this carrot is shorter. Down here with these caterpillars, we can tell that this caterpillar on top is longer and this one is shorter. We could also say that this one is the shortest and this one is the longest. So next we're going to talk about height. So when we think about height, you want to think about going up and down. So our words that we're going to use are tall and short. And then we could also say taller and shorter when we're comparing things. And then again, the tallest and the shortest. So when we put the est at the end of the words, that means it's going to be the most tall or the most short. So here's another couple of examples. We have two houses. This house here on the left, we can tell, remember they're lined up side by side, the same baseline. This house on the left is, we can tell, shorter, and this house on the right is taller. Down here looking at these trees, again, look how they're lined up so we can measure them and tell how tall they are. This tree on the left is going to be the tallest or taller than this tree on the right, which is shorter or the shortest. And lastly, we learned about weight this year. So weight is, when we talk about weight, we're thinking about how light or heavy something is. If we're comparing them, we could say one is lighter or heavier. And then if we're comparing multiple things, we say one is the lightest or the heaviest. So let's look at a few pictures here, some examples. We have a car, and even though you can't tell from this picture, this is a real car, not a toy car. So think about a car that mom or dad drives, some markers, a pencil, and a spork. So when we're thinking about it, just by looking at these pictures, we could probably guess that this pencil is going to be lighter than this car. And we could say that the car is going to be probably the heaviest thing out of all of these pictures, right? But what might be a little bit harder to tell is this pencil and these markers. I wonder which one would be lighter and which one would be heavier. So we can't always tell just by looking at an object how light or heavy it is. That's when we would need to get some kind of tool, which we're going to talk about in just a second, such as a scale, to actually measure and weigh how much both of those objects weighs. So let's go ahead and talk about tools that we might use to measure. So on the left here, we have a ruler, and with rulers, we might use them to measure length and height. And then again, this is the balance scale, and we did use this a little bit in kindergarten this year to practice weight measurement. And remember, when we put objects in both sides of the scale, whatever side went down the lowest, that would be the heavier object. Now, parents, this is a note for you that kindergarten, our math standards do not say that students are required to know how to use a ruler. So we do not really spend a lot of time talking about this in kindergarten. We introduce it just so students know what it is, and we definitely might have practiced with it. And some students are actually already familiar with it, and that's great. But it is definitely not required for them to know how to measure with a ruler. They'll learn more about that in first grade, but it's not harmful to introduce them to it. However, what we do measure with is something called non-standard units of measurement, which is just basically anything that is not a ruler, and it could be any object. So I've given you guys an example here. This is our friend Buster Bear. Buster is at home with me right now. And I decided to pick two different things to measure Buster with. The first thing I used was sticky notes. So I laid Buster down, and remember, I want to start always from the bottom and go up to the top when I'm measuring. So I measured Buster with sticky notes, and we could see that he is about 3 sticky notes tall. Again, this is just, it's not an exact measurement, but I'm pretty close. And you can see he is about 3 sticky notes tall. I also decided to try measuring him with quarters. And when I lined up quarters next to Buster, I can tell that he's just about 10 quarters tall. So again, I just picked 2 objects that I had lying around my house. But you can tell, depending on the size of the unit of measurement that I'm using, sometimes it takes more and sometimes it takes less. So think about that when you're practicing measurement. And that's what I want you all to do on your own. So I want you to first pick something in your house that you could measure by height or by length. You could choose a stuffed animal, you could choose a book, your pillow, or if you are up for it, or your mom or dad or a sibling is up for it, you could ask them to measure you, or you could see if you could measure them. Now think about how you want to measure it. So you want to pick your unit of measurement. Think about how I measured Buster Bear, and I chose 2 different objects. So the smaller your unit of measurement is, it's going to take you more of that to measure something. But if you pick something big like books or shoes or something big in your house, that might not take as long. So just be creative, see if you can find something in your house that you could use to measure, and then measure it. So go ahead and line your object up with your unit of measurement and tell me, how tall is your object? Let's say you picked a stuffed animal. How many coins tall is your stuffed animal? Or if you want to measure yourself, how many books tall are you? So just be creative and think about what you could use in your house and take a picture, draw about it, and you could even make a little video telling me how you did it. So I hope you have fun measuring.